What up, guys? It's Riley again,
And Evan.
and we're here to give you a little update about what's been going on with the SomeFriends Studios team, and talk to you a little bit about our creative workflow as designers. So, suppose I'll start. I guess since, as I mentioned in the last little episode or webisode, whatever you call it. The game that we're working on stemmed from like a design of mine, like a creation of mine. So a lot of the things that go into the game, even as as little as the puzzles and the platforming, are very important to me, and a lot of thought goes into it. I'm sure it does Evan. So when I'm designing something new for the game, or when I'm implementing something new, I often start with the very, very base of the game, thinking of what is it that I think is special about the game, what is it that I'm trying to capture, or what is it that makes this game different from other games. And for us, I think even though a lot of it is like the visual and the experience of the game, there's a lot of mechanics that we're implementing to try to put the essence of the game into the actual gameplay, as well as just the visuals and the sounds, which those are things easier shown than explained, unfortunately. But obviously, if we're designing a level or a platform, we've got to keep in mind what we've already set for our mechanics. But as far as that goes, I mean, there isn't like a structured way that we've set out to do this. So I know the way that I do it is a lot different than Evan. So I'm not the most organized person in the world. I know Evan's always jotting down in his notebook, and a little more like he's got a more of a concrete process. So I'll let him explain what he does.
Well, I mean, when me and Riley first, I guess, kind of ran out the gates, our levels were they were both good in their own way, but they
very different.
They were different, and
eclectic.
Yeah. So I after some discussion with Riley, we sort of came up with like some pillars of design that we kind of stayed to, like just essences of like gameplay that we wanted to be at the forefront of our mind when we design levels. We came up with those because I guess we were already in the same mindset. We were just kind of going about it differently. Yeah. But for me, my kind of creative process is I drink like 4 cups of coffee or something. I just get myself a little buzzed up with caffeine, and
I didn't know this. This is all news to me.
Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit. I like to exaggerate. I like to drink coffee while I work. So, but I guess I kind of think of or based off the mechanics, like sort of like I like to think about how you just simply how you move around the world or the levels, and then I kind of think of like what would sort of be like a fun challenge to sort of like the character, like let's say he could leap forward a little, like he can roll and then jump. So like, what's different ways the player can experience that? Or like, what's different situations I can give the player to play with that? Like, maybe they could just, jump on like a bunch of little platforms. But if they, think, I can do a roll and then the jump and just, fly over that, for those speed demons out there, sort of give, some options. So I like to kind of, I guess, sketch up what I think would kind of look like a cool level, and while I'm drawing that up, I kind of I think of the mechanics and how the player would actually move around, and then I kind of stare at it for a little while and then trace with my pen, kind of be like, we jump here, and then it kind of there's lines everywhere, but it makes sense. It makes sense to me, and that's kind of, that's what matters. Sometimes I end up having to redraw them, but then I turn those into levels in the engine, and then of course, like, no one's ever going to draw a level and then perfectly recreate it. And it's going to just work perfectly. So I end up making a lot of tweaks, but the core of what I wanted to do still remains. So that's more or less my process.
Yeah. Well, you explained it better than I did. Basically I was a little more broad. What I meant when I said, I try to think of what's the basic tenets of the game that we're trying to capture, the essence of this, the game. And again, Evan explained it a little better, went into it more. Basically, what I meant was there are certain things in the game that we've decided are really what makes our game stand out. Like for example, I don't want to go too much into it because again, these things are easier to show than to tell about.
Yeah.
But we have a layered mechanic through our platformer, whereas in traditional platformers, you move just from left to right. Well, in our game, we have a system where you actually move into the world, and go through layers and sections of the game, and it gives it, sort of this literal and figurative depth, and that layer mechanic opens up a lot of options for us to sort of play with the player's expectations or play with visuals in ways that will change the gameplay. And when I'm designing, what I think is fun about designing is that is just one of the many things I have to consider, that one mechanic. And there's many mechanics in our game. Each mechanic is set in place to try to make our game not only fun, but different, interesting, different than, your average game. So what Evan and I have to do is we have to consider, the broad things like the layer system. That's a big one of ours.
Yeah.
And we need to use that in a way that, that maximizes that mechanic, but then also fit in these other mechanics like jump, double jump, roll jump, wall slide, and each of those mechanics were catered in a very specific way to allow us to, again, use them creatively and do things that are going to be different for the player, different, exciting, and when we do have to design these levels, and Evan does more before the editor than I do. He jots in his notebook. But when you're in there and you're building this stuff, again, it's considering all of these mechanics at once and how they're going to fit together. And it's cool because it's, to me at least, it's almost like it's like building a puzzle. Like I have all my pieces here, and really all I have to do is find which way they fit the best, and eventually, after a lot of trial and error, because at least for me, that's how a lot of my levels go. A lot of trial and error, and eventually I find a good marriage of all of these mechanics. And
but then someone comes in and plays a level, and they're like, I can't get through this," and you're like, "Oh, everything I just worked so hard on."
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Like and that is really part of the process. So you'll go through this entire process and make this level. And you'll think, oh, this is great, and I've thought of it in every way, and perfect, and then someone will play it and go, oh, I broke it immediately by doing this. And then it's like, why didn't I think about that?
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of QA and, getting a different set of eyes, which is why I'm really happy that I have Evan here. We have more than one designer. Yeah. It's really, really helpful to have more than just your eyes seeing something, or, because once you worked on something long enough, it's very, very easy to
gloss over.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, even though we work a little bit differently, like I mentioned, it works out really well, and at least we communicate well. And in the end, although our levels are a little bit different, especially now, we've managed to make them much more cohesive than before.
Oh, yeah.
And we know, well, as like I said, we know to stick to those. What is it that we're really trying to capture with this game? What is it that makes it different and exciting? And to stick to those things and to use those mechanics and use those, I guess, features that we've put in to the best of our abilities. But that's really all we can do until y'all get your hands on it and tell us what you think, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully good feedback.
Yeah, we'll see. But until next week,
SomeFriends. See you.